right. Hello and welcome back to the Exo Parenting Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Chazz, joining us. A couple of weeks ago, I was going through TikTok and I discovered Mr. Chazz on there. It's TikTok Teach, right? Is that your Tick?
Tick, Teach, Talk, but the tick is spelled T-I-C-K.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, wow, way off. Anyways, found him on there. And I was just going through video after video after video, and I was so impressed with his content. It lines up with what I teach here, all behaviors communication, understanding tantrums from a different perspective, connection-seeking behaviors instead of attention-seeking behaviors. I was just like, yes, 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 yes. And also it's kind of a rarity, and I don't know if this is the same where you live, Chazz, but it's a rarity to find a male early educator. Is that
Very
true?
It is
Very rare. Okay. I'm like, I worked with some males when I was a preschool teacher, and they were some of my very favorite teachers. They just understood the kids. They could do rough and tough play without feeling like it was like, abuse. They were so fun to work with, and I loved it. And so I saw you. I'm like, he's a male teacher. He's got all of this content on point. So I figured you'd be an amazing addition to the podcast. So I reached out, asked if you'd come on my podcast. You obviously said yes. Here you are. And I had you scheduled originally. I didn't tell you this, but I had you scheduled for my 12th episode, which is in August. Then some things changed in the country. George Floyd was murdered, and you started doing some videos on the rioting, on how to understand those things from a human development perspective. And I just knew that it was so much more urgent for me to hear from you and for my podcast to hear from you. So I changed things around. I unscheduled all this stuff. And I said, you know what, whether you're a parent or a teacher, it's time to hear from Mr. Chazz, your perspective. And I'm just really excited to learn myself. Okay, so a couple of things you need to know about this man. First of all, this is why I think his TikToks are so dang good. He was a spoken word artist in college. That's so cool. If you do not know what spoken word is, go YouTube it, because it is one of the coolest forms of art. Maybe you have some for us later. I don't know. He has a master's in executive leadership, and his first teaching experience was a Montessori class of 3 to 5 year olds. And I have had a classes of 3 to 5 year olds, and I know how difficult that can be, especially when it's your first class. Holy cow. And then the last thing I'm going to say before he jumps in and introduces himself is that before this pandemic started, he did music with over 100 kids every Friday, ranging from 0 to 6. So that's pretty awesome. I love it. So tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay. So I will start it off with saying just what my purpose in life is. My purpose in life is to enjoy the process of becoming the best version of myself and help others do the same. So everything that I really try to do in my, professional and personal life, it is, dedicated to self-growth and also growth of others. I will be the first one to admit that, I still have a lot of learning and growing to do. Even, for example, this morning we were going to do I thought we were going to do it 9:30 Eastern time, but I didn't really read well enough and saw that it was mountain time. So I had to kind of push it back to 11:30. So I'm actually recording right now from one of the schools that I work at. I am an educational specialist. I work in 9 different schools, and pretty much what I do is I do, trainings. A lot of the trainings I do are the orientation trainings, bringing teachers in to our programs, just understanding our philosophy. I'm really passionate about that because I struggled so much when I first became a teacher because I didn't know what to do. But as when I learned better and I found mentors and, through the reflection process, I grew so much more to the point people were asking me for advice. And I was already so inspired by the fact that I was growing a community of little humans in my own classroom and really, growing and developing them in their formative years. But it was even more inspiring to me to, know that I could have an impact in not just my community of little humans, but a bunch of community of little humans and adult humans, and just how they're going about, how they're approaching and how they're going about it. Because I think there's a lot of times when we first try to be, a parent or teacher, we don't know exactly, we don't understand, child development or when we don't really understand
100%.
kind of
It's
do
hard.
things that make it a lot harder than what it even has to be. And so I was really passionate. So I'm really passionate about that. So kind of fast forward, I've been in this position as educational specialist for 4 years. When I first got into the position, my first thing was I need to connect with as many people as possible, the little humans, the children, and the adults. And so the first way to kind of connect is all right, I want to teach everyone my name. So how am I going to teach everyone in 9 different schools, my name? I still understood, knew and understood the power of music. So I created a name song, which kind of went like this. Well, did go like this, does go like this. What's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz. What's my name? Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz, Mr. Chazz. So every time I would go in a room, I would kind of introduce myself that way. It was almost kind of like an intro, outro song
I love
that I
that.
would do, and it worked. And so that's kind of become my brand. My TikTok name is Tick Teach Talk. But my Instagram name is Mr. Chazz. A lot of the people in the field, the industry know me as Mr. Chazz. So it's kind of become part of my identity. So yeah, that is a little bit about who I am. Again, I was training a lot of teachers, a lot of new teachers and a lot of experienced teachers while children were in the school. The pandemic happened. So all of the children who were in the school went home. I started to see how so many parents were struggling. A lot of it wasn't jest, but serious, but making light of the real struggles that parents were having. And so I figured, my goal was to help the teachers work with the children. Now the children aren't with the teachers as much. The parents have become the teachers. So let me actually invest, more of my time into the parents as teachers and helping them develop their child, because parents may not necessarily understand child development. Just because you have a child doesn't mean you get a manual on and your specific child too, because every child is different, and so that can be really challenging. So I've been dedicating my time to helping parents. It's been super fulfilling, just as fulfilling as working in the classroom and hearing all of the parents coming back days or weeks later and talking about how much of an impact I've, made in their home life, their relationship with their child. And that is so fulfilling, because I really think, again, my goal is to enjoy the process of becoming the best version of myself and help others do the same. And so to know that I am helping parents do that, and it's going to affect the next generation of humans, is super fulfilling to me. So that is, if you want to sign up for my coaching, I do it through Patreon, and I do Zoom calls, I do text messages. My goal is to make it as affordable for everyone. So right now it's $5 a month for individualized coaching. And I do really think, for the value that I've been able to provide, that is, dirt cheap. But I think I get the extra payment in the fulfillment of my payoff is really helping you and actually making that impact in you. And that's what I've been kind of driven by. So that is my long introduction.
Thank you. I love that. All of it. Okay, let's just jump right in. Okay. Let's talk about how we can look at what happened in Minneapolis from a human development perspective.
Okay. And so when we talk about this, I think it's, there are so many facets to this conversation. And what I really love to do when I'm training, when I'm coaching, I love to kind of relate, the challenges that, children are having to the challenges that adults have. And we go through a lot of the very same challenges. We all have emotions, and our emotions are what drive us, right? So, kind of starting, if and this topic really came off of a few TikToks, as Lauren was saying, that I made. And what I was really trying to say is that, everyone on this planet is trying to meet their needs, right? And there are varying needs, and depending on who you talk to, some people will say that they can categorize all the needs in 6 needs of certainty and variety. But really, the need in terms of this specific conversation, the need that people have been feeling and that may have been a result of the things that are happening right now is that need for safety and security. Everyone needs to feel safe and secure. Adults and children, like humans, need to feel safe and secure. And when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's the foundation. And when when people don't feel safe, when people's needs are not met, they're going to do what they can to meet those needs, especially if it's one of those survival needs. So I think that is what's happening here when we see the things like the looting and the rioting that is happening. And I'm not condoning rioting, I'm not condoning looting, but what I am saying is when people are trying to meet their needs from verbally, through protests, through kneeling, through peaceful ways, and they are ignored, just like I'm sure you have, as a parent or a teacher, when you've ignored your child's needs or your classroom's needs, especially if it's the need for connection or the need for safety. A lot of times there's a physical response to meet their needs. So let me kind of relate it to, as a parent, how you would kind of feel. So imagine every parent has had a baby at some point, right? Unless you've adopted. Imagine you have your baby and a stranger picks up your baby, has your baby, you're at the park, whatever. They have your baby. Now, you're probably going to start to feel a little uncertain, and because it's a stranger, you don't necessarily trust them. So you're not feeling, and that sense of safety can extend to other people that you care and love about. You want your child to feel safe, and you don't feel safe with that stranger holding your child because you don't know them. First thing you may try to do is say, "Hey, can I have my baby back?" Right? Or can I hold the baby? Can I hold my baby? You're going to try in various ways to probably verbally, and maybe not. Maybe you might go to the physical first, but more than likely, you're going to try to verbally get your baby back. That doesn't work, or that stranger is ignoring you. Then what are you going to do next? You're probably going to start reaching for your baby. You're going to do something physical to try to get your baby back, to try to reestablish that need for safety of your child, your baby. And that is the way that a lot of people are feeling, that when they're seeing people that they feel like they can relate to, like that that person looks like me, being murdered, and over and over and over again. And a lot of times when we talk about this, we only talk about it in an isolated incident, when honestly, for people who understand the history and have also gone through the current experience and seeing the media, we understand that this is something that's been going on for centuries, right? There hasn't been, and when we talk about the relationship, and this can get to a whole nother conversation about power, which I think is something that is very valuable to learn as a teacher or as a parent of, because even as teachers and parents, our natural inclination is to try to have as much power as we can. And sometimes we don't feel comfortable if we don't have enough power in a situation. But I'm of the school of thought that we should give, when people don't have a lot of power, and this can go for anyone, with this, even talking about, everything that's happened with COVID, a lot of people felt powerless in the situation of their jobs, of kind of, what they can do to stop. And that's been very hard for people. Psychologically, that's been very hard for people. And so you see it in a lot of different situations. what you want to do is, as a parent, what you want to do is you want to try to give your, your child, or as a teacher, you want to try to give your class, your individuals as much power as they can handle. What has happened over, the last 400 years is there's been, the power construct that has been, whether it's, and systematic, right? Whether it's been stop and frisk, whether it's been, tough on crime bills, whether it's been, and I know I'm jumping from place to place. I'm trying to kind of at least give like little blips of things that, people who are listening may be able to research if they want to learn more themselves. If I did recently watch a documentary called The 13th. It's on Netflix. If you don't understand, and you're hearing, okay, I'm hearing a lot about, systematic racism and oppression, but I don't quite understand it. I don't quite see it. Like I understand that it's happening. I believe it, but I don't quite understand it. I think The 13th is a good documentary, and everyone has Netflix now, right? I think that's a good documentary to kind of start off, to kind of get a better understanding of it. But to kind of wrap it all up, when people do verbally express themselves and they feel ignored or dismissed, the natural reaction is to go to a physical means. Now, what does that, so that's kind of understanding the problem. What can we do as parents, as teachers, in the future to kind of create that better, to make that world a better place, to where, maybe the riots are happening less often. There's other means of people's voices being heard. Now, I think about it as two sides, right? One side will talk, for a voice to be heard, someone has to be listening. And in what we can do as teachers and as parents is that we can listen to, our children, or the next generation, and people in general. This doesn't just extend to children. It extends to human, to listen to each other, because part of how children are going to learn is by seeing it, us as adults modeling it, right? So they see us listening to each other, having civil discourse, us really empathizing, and even maybe sometimes changing our mind from the things that we hear from listening to someone. Like, it's okay to change your mind. Modeling that as parents and teachers, but also, modeling with your child, allowing your child to disagree with you. We always, a common thing that we say as parents and teachers are, because I said so, or, we expect children to blindly obey and just be yes kids to everything that we say and to listen to us, but then at some point we want them to be adults who, speak truth to power and actually stand up for what's right, but they don't have a lot of practice in their younger years of doing that. So they're going to be more likely to go to the physical response a lot sooner, right? As opposed to creating, trying to find more creative ways to still maybe create, because a part of what that, riot, part of the utility of the riot and the looting is that it has created a shock factor, right? And when we're shocked, then people are paying attention. Just like, to put it, what a parent would see or a teacher would see in a classroom. When a child wants attention, maybe they're doing, attention-seeking behaviors, which we reframe as connection-seeking behaviors. Maybe the first thing doesn't work, but they realize, okay, if I escalate it, if I do something really shocking, then that's what's going to work, right? And so that's kind of what happened. I think, would we even be having this conversation if the protests were, just peaceful, if there weren't riots, would there have been as much media coverage over it? Because this is something that is, George Floyd is not an isolated incident. This is not something new. This is not something different. The biggest difference in what I see in George Floyd as opposed to, one, anytime where you can see a video or you see any kind of medium of technology where you see it is a little bit more visceral, has a little bit more of an impact, which is kind of talks to the other point that I'm going to talk about of how we stop it. anytime you see it, and then also in combination with the riots, with the looting, it's caused us to pay attention. It's caused more people to maybe do a little bit more research, to maybe try to understand, maybe to create dialogue or conversation to where maybe progress happens. Now, I think that there are other ways that we can create a shock factor or bring attention to a cause. And I think that as parents, as teachers, what we could do is we can actively teach our children, our classrooms, how to protest, how to get creative, how to use, and there's the old school ways of, writing a letter to your senator, the protesting, the peaceful protests in the street. But now, I think we can be even more innovative with, with technology nowadays. Yes, we all have cell phones, we all take videos, but also tweeting senators, also creating videos, something that I'm doing in terms of trying, making TikToks and doing things through social media to create awareness. I think that if a whole generation grows up knowing and understanding different ways to make their voices heard, and they grow in the art or skill of being able to do that with the combination of people, the next generation of humans, being more empathetic and listening more because of the lessons taught by us, our generation. I think that is what's going to make the world a better place. I think that is what's going to make, the riots and the looting happen less likely. I think that is what is going to make, change happen more effectively. And right now, it's civil rights, but there's always going to be things in this country that we're going to want to improve and change. And it's important that we, learn the tools and the arts and the strategies on how to do that.
Okay, so good. So good. Okay, so a couple of things you said that just kind of stuck out to me, like we need to allow for compromise. Sometimes we need to listen to our kids. We need to teach them like that they can have a different opinion than us. And we can't do that by just saying, oh, don't backtalk me, or go to your room. I don't want to hear from you when you say that. And, I hear that all the time. It's like, my kid keeps backtalking me, or they keep saying like, I hate you, mom. And I say, don't take it personally. They're communicating a feeling. So maybe it's not okay to hit the mom, or maybe it's not okay to, break stuff when they're angry, but it is okay to disagree. So you can say, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset, but what can we do about it that's like more productive in that feeling? Because nobody really wants to tear apart their favorite thing when they're angry. They just, they're feeling upset, and that's how it comes out. So what are some other ways they can channel that emotion? So, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I'm just going to highlight something that you said that I think will be very beneficial for anyone listening, that, when you see a behavior, especially if it's something that's concerning to you, we can get frustrated and irritated about it, but it's going to be so much more productive if we're trying to to understand what that behavior is trying to communicate to us, and how we can teach them through the challenge that they're having, as opposed to dismissing it or punishing it. So I think that is the common thread of progress, trying to teach through our challenges as opposed through punishing. And even talking about, again, adults with the prison industry, right? Rehabilitation has been proven to be a lot more effective than just punishing people who have broken the law. If you just focus on punishment, they're going to be more likely to do it again. But if you focus on, helping them through whatever challenges that they're facing, they're going to be more likely to be a productive member of society and provide actual value to society.
Yeah, help them get the skills that they need to, function as an adult. Okay, so one of the things you had asked me before this was, how would you teach your child to stand up for what they believe in? And that question really has been on my mind for a couple of days, because I want to, on paper, I want to do all these awesome things, but sometimes I'm like, am I allowing it in my home all the time? Like, am I allowing Charlie to say, no, I don't want to eat that, or no, I don't want to, like sometimes they have these strong opinions, and I say, you know what, no, we need to do this or whatever. And sometimes it is okay as a parent to say, you know what, yeah, like we do need to be kind to our neighbors, or we do need to include them because that's nice. But we can allow for the opinion, and for if they don't like something to say, I don't like it. So one of the ways I do this in my home, and I want to do better after you've brought this to my attention, is I try to teach my kids to be assertive. And I've always tried to do this. So if one of my children and another of my children are fighting, I first go to the child who's hurt and say, hey, did you like that? And they say, like, no, I didn't like that. Then you need to say, I don't like that. Before I deal with whatever the child did that hit or took something, I go to the child who was the victim and say, if you didn't like that, you need to say, I don't like that. And I have them verbally communicate that, because I want them to be able to be assertive on their own, on the playground, at school. And so if they don't like something, I want them to say, I don't like it. So even when like my husband and my son, they start wrestling and he starts getting to his breaking point, instead of crying and running away, I want him to say, I don't like that. And then when he says, I don't like that, my husband and I, we listen to that. We say, okay, you don't like that. That means I'm going to stop. And so part of it is teaching them to say it. And then part of them is modeling the response ourselves. Like if they don't like something, okay, I'll stop. How, and then problem solve. Like, how could we do this differently? Do you want to take a break? You know, just different things. But that's something that I want to be better at in my home. It's something that I have tried to do, especially when the siblings are fighting. But I feel like I need to be better when they disagree with me.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can be hard. And to point out, when you're teaching, your child to say, I don't like that, you're giving them power, right? You're teaching them that they do have power over, their body or what they, choose to do. And that is powerful for them to learn. That is something that because they may not even recognize or realize that they can't say that, or that is what they're supposed to say. In that, and it can be hard as an adult, because I think that just the conditioning of how most of us were raised. Most of us were raised in that way, and just, because I said so. And so what we do is to default back into how we were raised when we are trying to grow and develop, our children. So it's something that we do have to relearn. And then the other thing is really going through the process of, okay, well, why am I asking them to do this, right? Is this really a safety thing? Is this really, and sometimes it takes some reflection on ourselves, and not just being on autopilot because we're so busy, because we have our own needs that also, by the way, need to be met. Maybe we're trying to, maybe we're trying to cook, or maybe we're trying to go to the grocery store, or maybe we're trying to tidy up and clean, or maybe, there are things that we feel like we need to do too, but I always say that, we're always going to be most successful when we match our needs as an adult with their needs as children. And so, and I think when they learn that their needs matter too, and that they can speak up for their needs, and they also learn, especially as they get older, in terms of saying, like, articulating why they want the things that they want, I think that's really powerful. And I think another thing that can be challenging to do, also in school, like, what do you do when, an administrator or a teacher of your child says, your child's not listening, is not listening, or they're questioning me. I'm trying to teach a lesson and they keep on asking questions. Or, like, how do we allow the advocacy when there's a third party, right? And I think that's something else. We didn't talk about that question, but, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's hard, because a lot of times if a teacher is bringing that up, then they have their own opinion on how it should be going. I feel like,
Yeah.
like if a teacher isn't responsive to that kind of questioning, then it's going to be hard to change their mind. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I would say, so here's an example that's kind of, there's a child who was getting in trouble all the time in their classroom, like, I don't know, third grade. And he was getting in trouble for like talking, and he was being too social. And the teacher said, he's just too social in my classroom. Like, I can't have him being this social in my classroom. And I told the mom, I'm like, okay, so like, is he doing anything wrong? She's like, no. I'm like, so is he like, she's like, he's just too friendly and I don't know how to control it. And I'm like, well, here's the thing, like, that's a great skill for him to have. So as a teacher, instead of punishing him for being social and friendly, how about she uses that
Yes.
in her classroom as a way to have him like use those skills in a way that's productive to her teaching. So I told her, like, maybe give the teacher, instead of saying, okay, I'll talk to him about it at home so he won't be friends with people. But what this is doing is saying, you can't be friends with people or you're going to be isolated in a corner in the classroom or something. So instead I said, okay, why don't you have him pass out the papers, and or have him be the door greeter when everyone comes in from recess, or have like 20 minutes where he like everybody can just chat or something. And so I was like, how can we take what that quote unquote negative behavior, which is not negative behavior, and turn it into something that can be useful in the classroom. So
Yeah.
in the example that you gave where the teacher like doesn't like the questioning or whatever, if say a teacher told a parent that, as a parent I would say, you know what, I encourage questioning in my home, I encourage them to disagree, and I think it's really helpful. Is there a way you can incorporate some time for debate or for discussion in your classroom in addition to what you're teaching? I do agree that, like, you know, they need to respect the teacher, but is there a way that we can bring a productive conversation in the classroom so that other voices can be heard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful, and I love that too. And especially the example of the social child. Like, instead of, we could look, that might be that child's superpower,
Yeah.
really. You know, and that might be the child who just loves being so social and might be really, especially for teaching, and we're honing kind of that skill. Like, that might be the child who, you know, organizes the protests peacefully, that and gets all the right people in the room, that really does create progress, right? And so I, but you know, and I think the other part of another part of the conversation is that, you know, that teacher has needs too, where they may be feeling a need of not quite, you know, feeling secure in their position because they may be getting pressure from outside forces that their, you know, kids have to have, you know, this score, that these certain amount of numbers on test scores, or they have to know this specific information. And so it may make them, the teacher, feel like, okay, well, I just need to get through this, which I think is a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. Maybe we can do another podcast on that one
There we
day.
go. Yeah.
But but yeah, I think, you know, my main thing and my main goal, at least right now, is to help people understand each other's perspectives. Um, and I just did my most recent, I think it was my most recent TikTok, was on just saying that, like, you know, it's okay that, like, because I've been seeing a lot of people on social media, you know, almost feel like, or I understand, again, I understand where the sentiment is coming from. Like, don't, like, you know, I see, you know, people have been saying, I see, like, you're silent, you know, in the face of this atrocity of what's going on right now. Like, we hear you loud and clear. And I think that some people just may not know exactly what to say, or they're not, you know, they might still be processing or learning themselves. And like I think that it is okay. And I think that, you know, we need to allow people the time to process and learn and to ask questions and to understand what's going on, and not just pressure people to, you know, there's to like just go out and speak or make a, you know, there's a lot of different ways. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of, like, you know, the art of the protest. There's a lot of different ways that you can support a movement. And it's not necessarily your fault that you don't you don't not fully understand systemic racism, um, or the way other people are feeling. Like, it's okay, you know. And one of the things that I pointed out is that in America, we are largely taught from a Eurocentric point of view, that, that being that we're taught from the perspective of Europeans. And that's not wrong, but that's why diversity in general is important. And so in terms of, I've been getting a lot of questions lately, like, how do I teach my children to be accepting of other races and not be, and not reinforce the stereotypes. And I think one part of it is just being aware of the media they're consuming and helping, maybe sometimes asking them questions and maybe helping them process. But another thing is like, I think sometimes if you've never met a Native American or African American or or a Spanish person, and your only interaction is through things that you see in media, where in a world where a lot of times media has a tendency to reinforce negative stereotypes, that is what your opinion is probably going to be. So I would, if you can, I wouldn't say, if you have friends of varying cultures, like, go over to their house and, learn, eat their food and kind of learn about their culture, and then invite them over to your house, because you have an important culture too, that we can all be better from learning a little bit more about each other. And I think that increases kind of, the empathy that we can have for each other and understanding that we can have for each other. And I think that only makes these conversations, stronger and more powerful. So that's kind of what I would say about that. In terms, if any parents, it's a question I've been getting recently, so I just kind of wanted to throw it out there for anyone who's.
Yeah, for sure. That was super helpful. And I think too, like, it's hard because if you do say something, there's kind of backlash. If you don't say something, there's backlash. If you say the wrong thing, there's like kind of a lot of just sensitive feelings around a lot of this conversation. So I appreciate what you said, that, sometimes it's okay to be silent, and it doesn't mean that our silence means that we're not trying, we're not learning. And I appreciate that. I have tried to be vocal. We've had conversations with my family. My mom is like, I'm so proud of my mom right now, honestly, because she like downloaded all these Audible books. She's like, I need to be better. And I'm like, yes, Mom, thank you. So I feel like even if it's not online, conversations are happening and people are realizing. I myself, like, I knew that this was happening across the country, Black Lives Matter. I didn't understand the extent until I saw that video of George Floyd, and I realized, like, okay, this is real. Like, I live in a predominantly white community. I don't see this day to day. And so to see that, I think you said this earlier, like, to actually see it made it so much more real. I was connected to it, and it made me feel something deeper than I've ever felt on this issue before. And so it lit the fire under a lot of us who have kind of just like not really realized it's happening totally. Anyways, and so it's like, okay, how can we be better? What can we do? How can we incorporate different cultures into our lives? I try to do it through books, through media. But again, I live in a predominantly white society, and so it's like kind of hard to find a lot of friends with different cultures. One thing that we do is we travel. And so we'll travel to somewhere like the Bahamas, and usually people just stay in the resort the whole time, But what we try to do is we find a church that we can go to on Sunday. And when we go to a local church, we can see that culture. So in the Bahamas, in Taiwan, in Hawaii, those are 3 totally different cultures that I could experience with my family because I went to their local church meeting group. And you can find any church on a Sunday that would welcome you. Anyway, so I think there are ways that we can do it even in the different societies that we live in. Having different books, having different types of dolls. Like my daughter's Black Baby is her favorite play baby. And actually, funny story, last night she was carrying it around. I am not like, here, take this Black Baby because this is going on. No, she just chose it. We were outside feeding the pheasants, and she put the baby in her car seat, walked away. And then she went back to the car seat, the baby was gone. One of the dogs took the baby, and we had to search for 40 minutes to find this baby in our neighbor's field. Anyway, got the baby back. It was super, super, super sad, but we found it. She kept saying, baby! Anyway, so that's a funny story. But anyways, I think there's ways we can be better, and I know that just what I'm doing is very baseline, and I can go so much further beyond that. And so I appreciate you coming on here, helping me see it from a different perspective, and just understand, okay, behavior is communication, and behavior is kind of a symptom of what's happening inside our hearts, our
Yeah.
needs that aren't being met. And if we can recognize that behavior that's happening, looting, rioting, angry voices, people, stealing, all of these things related to this, not related to this, all of these things are communicating an unmet need, anger, something that's happening in the heart. And so if we can understand people from that perspective and say, you know what, behavior is communication. They're trying to communicate this. It's obviously, not as effective. But like you said, if the rioting wasn't happening, a lot of us probably wouldn't be still talking about this.
Yeah.
So sometimes that behavior does need to escalate to that level. It's like when you're in the classroom and a kid just starts like punching all the kids. If he was just like sneakily doing some behaviors, we wouldn't have noticed it. But now he's punching all the kids. Okay, now we got to figure out what he's communicating. So,
Right. Right. Right.
anyways, that's how I feel.
Yes, I look forward to coming back. Last thing to say, if you do want coaching, www.patreon.com /Mr. Chazz, and that's Chazz with 2 Z's. If you're looking for me on Instagram, it's Mr. Chazz. If you're looking for me on TikTok, it's Tick, Tick, Teach Talk.
And I will link all of that in the show notes so that people don't have to mess it up. But you guys definitely go check out his TikTok. If you don't have the app yet, get the app. It is worth your time, or maybe not so much because I get on there for hours sometimes. But hey, it's fun.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for letting me come on and being my first podcast experience.
Woo!
Can't wait for more. And this was a great experience. I love, you said it was going to be like about 30 minutes. I knew, knowing me, how much I talk, it's going to be longer, but it is about 12:30. I am about to start managing this, the building and being in classrooms. So it was so great to be here. It was so great to talk to your community. Let's all make the world a better place. I appreciate this opportunity, Lauren.